Welcome to Irish Football Weekly. This is one of your hosts, Josh Benjamin here. Our co-host, my co-host, I should say, Tony Hunter is unable to make it this week, so I'm flying solo this week. So welcome to Irish Football Weekly, where we talk Notre Dame football here on the Grueling Truth. Got a lot of media places where you can listen to our shows and other shows from the Grueling Truth. First and foremost, the website, www.gruelingtruth.net. And then Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes. There's an app for iPhone. So if you go to the App Store, go to the Grueling Truth app, and you can listen to any shows, including ours, of course, Irish Football Weekly. Google Music, iHeartRadio is also a great media place to find us. So tons of different places to find us to listen to us ramble on. Well, we are in week 3 of the college football season. And the Irish are now at a 1-1 record. Last week's defeat at home, put on by the Georgia Bulldogs, 20-19. Very close game, obviously, but a lot of things that we need to work on as a group, and I mean the Irish. But I want to talk about some stats here because I think they're very. They're just outstandingly just eye-opening when it comes to what they are compared to the previous week. So our rushing game against Temple, which was game 1, was 422 yards on 44 carries. And that is a ridiculous amount, and I would never expect every week in, week out to be that great of an average. But this past week, and give the Georgia Bulldogs credit. Personally, when I watched that game, I thought Georgia did an awesome job on defense, especially of just maintaining that setting the edge type of defense for the Irish to not be able to get outside. And their linebackers were pretty good as far as coming up and closing those gaps along with those D linemen. So kudos to them. But the Irish, okay, they had a bad day of rushing. So they had 37 carries on 55 yards, which is that average is not very good at all, and that's just not good. Less than a yard per carry, and we'll get to the specifics there here in just a few minutes. But we go to the passing game. Brandon Wimbush, I would say, didn't really improve a whole bunch in that game as far as completions and attempts. He did have more completions, but he had 10 more attempts as well. So against Georgia, he was 20 of 40, so 50% percentage there with 210 yards passing, okay, no TDs, and his 32-yard pass was the longest pass he had in the game. So not a great effort as far as the passing game either. Just a little disappointed with the performance overall with the Irish on September 9th last week. So let's dive in there. So going back to the running game, and from what we had talked about previous week, Tony and I, is they got to make sure they establish that game and keep it rolling. And they did not do that whatsoever. And it was just a bad setting overall. Again, kudos to the D-line and linebackers, that front seven for Georgia Bulldogs, but it seemed like there weren't very many holes. And it seemed like we were almost in slow motion at times as far as the back. And I'm still wondering why we didn't include all the backs in this past week. So just going off what I see here, I mean, we didn't distribute the ball a whole bunch either, but just overall just didn't seem right. It didn't seem like it was the Notre Dame offense of, I guess, week 1. And usually, and all the coaches out there listening, correct me if I'm wrong, usually from week 1 to week 2, that's a big jump in how you're executing plays. Granted, the opponent's a little bit different. I would even say Georgia's defense is much better than Temple's, but it seemed like we didn't capitalize on some things when we could have. So just a little frustrated on obviously our fans and including the program. They're frustrated. They wanted to get that win for the home crowd. And speaking of home crowd, I don't know if anyone listening was at the game. I'd like to hear this either on Twitter, which I'm at Coach JB4, by the way, or you can get on Facebook and add me, of course. Look for Josh Benjamin, add me there. I'd like to hear from some listeners and tell me if you were at the game, how many Georgia fans were there? I watched the game on TV, and it seemed like there was a lot of red in that stadium, and so it didn't feel like it was a true home game per se. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just looking into things too much, which is very well possible. But I just thought that home crowd could have made a huge difference, and I didn't think it did. So anyway, well, we talked about the Irish and what happened, and Brandon Wimbush. I want to talk about him just for a few seconds. So he seemed very calm throughout the whole game, but it just seemed like going through the motions a little bit. Maybe he was kind of complacent. Maybe he was starstruck. Maybe that defense was too quick for him to react to and get those passes more accurate. But it seemed like that he wasn't very comfortable within his own skin there behind that line. And normally that line does an excellent job, and I would say they dropped off just a tad with some things, letting those rushers get in there. And then to end the game, wow, it didn't even get a chance to get down and get a chance to shoot for a field goal. Kind of had the strip sack there, recovery, to kind of put the nail in the coffin by the Bulldogs. But I think the line has to kind of take that to heart and understand, wow, we just let our guys down. We let our skill guys down. And the same goes for the skill guys and the quarterback. And but, man, those linemen, they kind of took a step back there, literally, when it comes to the protection and some things where I thought the communication up front wasn't the best. But again, it's mano a mano. Sometimes a hat on a hat when it comes to the offensive line going against that front seven. And you got to be able to look at the person across from you and dominate them and stay with that throughout the game. And that O-line did not do that. A little disappointed on the offensive line there. So as far as the defense goes, I did play pretty decent. There was a couple miscommunications on the secondary, and that kind of hurt us a little bit, some missed tackling. And I'd like to know how different the NCAA rules are when it comes to having pads during practice, during the regular season, and in the preseason, like before, during training camp, for example. I know the NFL is pretty strict on those things. I didn't know if the NCAA, and I can't remember. I haven't played in about a decade or so I feel kind of old asking that question. And I know things have changed since I've played, but man, that tackling just didn't look the same. It almost looked like that Georgia just was a step ahead of everybody, and as far as the Irish goes, and just had that attitude. It just seemed like they knew that they were going to win, and if no one else thought that, they thought that 100%. So just a disappointing loss, especially at home, 1-point loss, when they could have had a couple chances there to kind of get in field goal range, and just had some miscommunication and some errors. So with that being said, I do want to talk about one thing now that I just thought about this. So I want to talk about Coach Brian Kelly's press conference after the game. And I almost think it's sometimes unfair for players, coaches, to get interviewed right after the game. But I get why the media wants to. They want that emotion. They want that those feelings to come out, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Obviously, if you're on the winning side, it feels great, and they talk about, obviously all the same things. That was a team effort, kind of cliche here. Team effort. It was a great job, guys executed. They made it easy for me. Coaches had great decisions and so on. That's what you hear from the good side, and from the not so good side, you hear we just gotta get better in these areas, and try not to point out specific people unless they just flat out stunk it up. But and of course, especially as a coach, you're not necessarily taught, but you obviously own that loss. You don't necessarily blame the players or anything. At least in my opinion, you don't. But going along with that press conference, going back to that. So at the end of last year, Coach Kelly mentioned something along the lines of, I need to be more calm. You're going to see a more calm person out of me, and so on and so forth when it comes to, being on the sideline. Because to be honest with you, watching games last year and the camera showing the sidelines, his face was red, more red than often than just his normal self. So it seemed like last year was just very intense, which sometimes that's okay. Depends on who you have on your team, the roster-wise, coaches-wise, and so on. But he did say that he was going to make that calm approach, and I have not seen him, quote-unquote, blow up on the sidelines, get red-faced, scream, yell, throw things. Maybe you have. Maybe I missed it, but I haven't seen him do that. And so the press conference happens, and questions are being asked, of course, and I'm reading this, by the way, from Yahoo.com, Pat Forte, which I really respect. But this last piece of the article, it kind of gets me irked a little bit, and there's kind of stuff in the media. Just quickly touch on that. People say or do in the media just kind of get people to get upset, get emotional a little bit, and he got me emotional a little bit, and just kind of, why would you put that in there? He had a great article written very well, and so the end of the article, it says this reporter asked him a question about, this is another one possession loss, and how do you combat that? You said that you aren't going to have those anymore, and after a game, very frustrated, should have won the game possibly. With all the errors on both sides, Georgia and Notre Dame had a chance to win. They really did, and he got a little upset with that, and rightly so. Asked that question. It just seemed like a question that was meant to be said to kind of get him fired up a little bit. And unless that person had a good heart and was very trustworthy and asked that, for the truest of their heart, not trying to get get him aroused or anything, get him excited about what happened just before that press conference, he got upset, and I don't blame him. And Pat Forte kind of hammered him and said, he said he was going to be this guy and he wasn't. Well, you know what? People can't always be a robot or say they're going to do this or act this certain way and something gets them. And that's going to happen, folks. That is part of life, not just football, not just a press conference, but life. And so I don't necessarily blame Brian Kelly for acting that way, but then again, you look on the other side and you say, well, he did say that, and this is the coach that's supposed to role model and be the face of Notre Dame football and supposed to act a certain way, and I don't know. I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to this, because personally, I don't know if I would have acted like that as a person, but I don't blame him for doing that either. So just frustrated. I don't. 1 point loss at home, had the chance to win the game, didn't come their way, and so anyway, that press conference and that article by Pat Forte really kind of got me a little bit. Just want to talk about that, and if you guys have any thoughts or feelings about that, go ahead and jump on Twitter at CoachJB4. That's my Twitter handle, and then Facebook, of course, add me as a friend, or find me on there, and we'll talk some Notre Dame football. But moving on, and it's what you have to do, because second game of the season, it's not make or break per se just yet. They got an opponent coming up who has had some success against them at their place, Boston College Eagles, and so we go over to Boston College to face them. They're 1-1, and face a team that the record against them at their place is 4-4. So thinking ahead here, hopefully we jump in there and get that win. We got to bounce back and play the best that we can play So offensively, we had to set the tone. Josh Adams, Dexter Williams, Brandon Wimbush, all those guys have to step up this game and make a statement. And it starts one play at a time. And I know that's cliche, but too many guys, too many coaches, even fans, they look, at the whole game when each play is broken down, and that's how they have to take it. That's the attempt. That's the thoughts they have to take going into Boston College, because is this a winnable ball game? Absolutely it is. 1,000% it is a winnable ball game, but they have to dominate up front, and that offensive line has to, look at that tape they had against Georgia. Say we have to have quicker feet. We got to get our hands out and get those guys and latch on to them and establish that run game quickly, because that's what helps Brandon Wimbush out. That's what helps St. Brown. That's what helps those receivers and tight ends get open. And that's the truth. That's facts. And so we as a football nation for Notre Dame have to understand we got to watch for that, and hopefully they make it that I won't even say that's something that is new to them. I would say that's something that they have to get back to, that just like week one. So, they got Boston College this Saturday, September 16th, over at Boston College, 3:30 p.m. on ESPN. And so Josh Adams didn't have a great game, of course. I mentioned those stats earlier. But Josh and Dexter Williams and even Brandon's got to get the running game for himself open as well. And that all starts up front and with those guys running hard. And what that will do, that will make Brandon's life easier in the passing game for sure. Pull up those safeties up a little bit in the box, maybe even causing the blitz where they don't want to blitz in certain downs and situations, and you hit them where they're not. And that'll hopefully get Brandon's confidence back into play here and get him going once again and get him comfortable behind that front line there. So pretty important stuff with Brandon Wimbush and how they're going to get that established. Coach Kelly, I hope, will harp on that running game first, because that can dictate a whole lot of things going into Boston College. Going back to the defense, I think that just got to fix the small errors, the small communication errors amongst the secondary and the linebackers for that matter. So those guys, when they do 7-on-7 this week, got to communicate, got to know where guys are, got to feel comfortable with those guys in front and behind them and to the side of them in that secondary. So that's really, really crucial. I like the intensity they had against Georgia Bulldogs. They did fly around, in my opinion. I thought they played hard. I thought, for the most part, they were assignment-driven, and they knew their assignment. They went at it with an attitude. So coaching staff, give kudos to those guys for that defensive side of, staying on the attack and staying aggressive and feeling more and more comfortable. Besides those few errors, it seems like they're getting more and more comfortable with each other, with the scheme, how they're handling things, and just kind of proud the way they've reacted and played in these first two games. So going into Boston College, they got to make sure get those communication errors fixed, and then tackling. Every team needs to work on tackling. That's a must. I don't know about every day, but I would say most days that they need to work on that and get that handled, just because not many, going back to player safety and whatnot, they don't do it as much. And I think that, yes, there is risk for injury, but you signed up for this, and whether you like it or not, there's always a risk. You can get out of your house and get in a car wreck, and heaven forbid that happen, but we all take risk, and those guys need to make sure that they're practicing great technique and getting guys to the ball, not just solo tackles, getting a group effort there. So moving on here, we're going to go to our next segment, which is pretty brief this week because, well, like I said, Tony's unable to make it with us. You heard me ramble on for a while. Tony will be listening here later on, but we go to the three toughest picks, and man, I'm very ashamed. We can't have it this week, obviously, with Tony not being here with us, but the record, Tony is whipping me. He's got me. He's got a 6-3 record so far, and wow, I'm I'm the other way around. I'm 3-6. So next week I gotta get them all right, and he's got to get them all wrong, and let's get back to 500 there. But Tony's doing a nice job of making some picks. Last week we had Clemson and Auburn. We both picked Clemson there. Then we had the OSU-Oklahoma game, which was a very big shock. I'm speaking for Tony as well with this. We were both shocked with that game and just how Ohio State played, or lack of, and how Oklahoma came in and took it personal last year and literally put the flag right in the middle of the field. So and then our last game was Stanford at USC. He picked USC, got that game there. So he's up 3 games essentially. So now next we'll talk about the Irish prediction. So Irish prediction going into a place where they've been pretty successful, but also there's been times where they've had some slip-ups. Going into Boston College, and they lead the series all time 14-9. Brian Kelly's undefeated against them 4-0, and Notre Dame's won the last 5. Out of the last 10 games, though, they're 5-5. So before that, they were going into Brian Kelly's new program 0-5 in the last 5, and he's around the last 5 wins there. Since the year 2000, Boston College actually leads 7-5, so that's not a good thing. But going back to that streak and with Brian Kelly, being undefeated, their first meeting ever, Boston College and Notre Dame, was in 1975, and that was when Notre Dame was ranked number 9. They met in Foxborough, Massachusetts, and it was a score of 17-3. Notre Dame pulled that win off there. And the last meeting, of course, was a couple years ago at Fenway Park, if you remember that. It was a close game. Notre Dame was actually ranked pretty high. They were ranked number 5. They squeaked it out 19-16. And the last win for Boston College, which was almost a decade ago, they shut out the Irish at home 17-0. So, like I said, the last 8 games against Boston College at their place, it's 4-4. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And going back to Irish prediction, I think it's going to be a much closer game than people think. Boston College always plays Notre Dame hard. Whether the score says so or not, they play physical, and they want to, demolish that the Irish. So I'm going to say it's a close game. I'm going to say the Irish are going to win, though. I'm going to say it's 21-17 Irish going on the road, picking up that first road win of the year. On the road for the first time. So those guys go in and beat an ACC team at their place. And like I said, 21-17 Irish win. So hopefully all things go to the Irish way there. Well, it seems kind of quick, but I talked a lot, and I'm sure you don't want to hear me talk anymore. I know I don't. So just want to say thanks to all the fans and listeners out there. Had some tweets from all of you and a lot of Facebook messages, so I appreciate that. Tony appreciates that. Keep listening, and also comment on our post there, whether it's Facebook and those pages or our own profile page. We attach our shows to several Facebook groups, especially Notre Dame Irish fans, so they can get a chance to listen to ourselves ramble on. But going back to those medias, we have tons of medias that you can find us on. thegruelingtruth.net, our home website, which is an awesome thing. It has so many shows on there. Not only our Irish Football Weekly show, we have my own show, Real Deal, and we also have Tony's other show on the now LA Rams. And so, and tons more in different sports. So if you're a multi-sports fan, which I highly encourage, you can listen to us on our website, thegruelingtruth.net, but also Stitcher, Spreaker, Google Music, iTunes, which we now have an app in the App Store for iPhones, the Grueling Truth app. look that up, and you can subscribe there. And iHeartRadio, Google Music, so a lot of places you can listen to us talk Irish football or anything for that matter. So just want to say thanks for all of you listeners out there. For my co-host who was unable to make it tonight, Tony Hunter. Tony, we'll miss you, man. Hopefully we get a chance to talk next week. Some Irish football. I'm sure we'll talk during the game on Saturday. Don't forget, Saturday, 3:30 on ESPN. We're going to Boston College and going to come home with a win. So for my co-host, Tony Hunter, this is Josh Benjamin signing off for Irish Football Weekly. Go Irish! Peace.